how did the Good Morning Britain? I mean, you and Ben both do a game show, so that is possible, and you're both on Good Morning Britain, and it is. I understand why they went for you. But it still is. I mean, you were initially like the replacement for Piers Morgan, and you would not be my first thought. Go, who can we get who's a bit like Piers Morgan? Fill that gap.
Well, actually, to be honest, I wasn't the replacement for him. I was on before him. I was on for about a good year while he was on. But when he left, decided to get out of his chair and leave, they just called me up and said, do you want to do more dates? I said, yeah, I'm very, very happy to. So I ended up, it looked like I'd replaced him, but I'd been there already a year. But as I've always said, the best thing about covering Piers Morgan is that you never have to meet Piers Morgan. It's fantastic, you know. Yeah.
But it's a really interesting show, Good Morning Britain, because it's an entertainment show and it's light-hearted. You've got which obviously we can expect you to do, but you also have to interview political figures. You have to talk about very controversial subjects, some of which I'm sure you have thoughts on, and sometimes you express those thoughts. But you're obviously you've got to can retain balance there as well.
Absolutely, and it is always about being impartial, and it's a very difficult thing, impartiality at times, because really, we are dealing with at the moment the government that's been in power for 13 years. That's an incredibly long period of time. They are accountable for almost everything around at the moment, and it's very difficult to point that blame at the Labour Party, other than ask them what they're going to do, and that's quite speculative, but we do that, and that's important. So really, it is our job to hold them accountable. And the other thing is, and I say to my team sometimes, is that I think just because Swallow Braverman or Priti Patel is making the refugee crisis or migrant crisis a political issue, that doesn't mean it is. I think it's a humanitarian issue. It's a human issue. It's looking after fellow human beings, and I think it's really important to put that point across. And I think let's face it, there's a lot of people who don't agree with me, who have lots of column inches and have whole TV stations dedicated to that kind of narrative. So I think it's really important as a British Asian lad from Birmingham that I stand up for those people too.
Yeah, I know you don't have to answer this, but how does it, from coming from that community and coming from almost exactly the same background as someone like that, how does it feel when you see them? They're essentially saying, if this was a generation back, they're saying your parents...
You mean some of these politicians?
Some of these politicians are saying, their own parents, but also it's weird when they're from the same community.
It's so weird, because just to point out, people don't realise, Swallow Braverman, Rishi Sunak and Priti Patel, either both of their parents or one of their parents, in each case, came from East Africa. My mother came from East Africa, Kenya. When the British decided that they were going to leave Kenya, and General Kenyatta took back power, all the British people there had to leave. Britain at the time said, we will take the white British. They refused to take the Asian British. Right. And there were protests. People said, no, this is not possible. You can't do that. They were threatening legal cases. At one point, they said, okay, well, we'll allow just 3,000. There was a visa scheme. And they said, well, that's not enough. There's tens, not even 100,000 there. They said, oh, well, can they go back to India or go back to Pakistan? I said, no, they're British. They've got British educations. They speak English. They want to continue in that structure. They're going to English schools. And it's a similar situation now.
Yeah.
And had the protest not happened and had the government backed down, myself, Swallow Braverman, Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak would not be in this country right now. So I find that remarkable, really, in many ways, because the one thing I've always had in my head, no matter where you are in your career and what you do, and it's a quote actually from Jack Lemmon, and he always says this thing, I always quote it, is send the elevator back down. Because it's those old American elevators, right? That in those days you had to flick a button for it to go back down.
Yeah.
Send the elevator. And so when I look at them and say, you've achieved, forget what party you are, forget your politics, but you've achieved the highest point in the political structure. And the very people like you who need your help 30, 40 years later, from the time that you were in, you're turning your back on them. I find that really, really hard. So that's just incredible.
From my point, if I was them, you'd think, the people who I'm representing and the party that I'm representing, the people who are the white people who are going along with the anti-immigration thing, they don't like me. You know, they're only like me because I'm agreeing with them and because
Yeah,
I'm an acceptable, it gives an acceptable face to that if someone of that background is.
The thing about the Conservative Party, it's quite interesting, isn't it? All the people, the politicians of colour that have succeeded are all on the anti-immigration side of the debate.
Yes.
So that tells you, quite a lot. Now, look, I mean, the jury's still out, actually, whether they have got the gauge of the nation. I think there's a lot of people out there who've got a lot of sympathy for, refugees and migrants, and they want a system that works, a system that's right. And I do wonder whether this rhetoric of that they're criminals and we're scared of them and we don't want any of them is actually what most of the population think. I doubt that's the truth.
Well, I don't think it is. I think that's, if it was, they're hoping that will lead to electoral success. It doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be enough.
No.
Even horrible racists are thinking, no, yeah, but come on. The rest of it's too much.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think most people, it's a horrible situation and most people don't like the idea of dead people coming up on beaches, historically, the people who've propagated those kind of things haven't been the nicest people in history. History doesn't serve them well.
That's right, yes. Yes, to say the least.
Yeah.
But look, there are people from all kinds. I think I talked about Mr. Khan. I mean, Mr. Khan was actually quite anti-immigration at the time. He didn't want, all these Eastern Europeans coming over here, taking our jobs meant for us Pakistanis. So, and actually, there are people like that. So perhaps, Suella Braverman will pretty represent that side of person as well. There are people out there who are very worried about their place in the city, their place in society, and worried about anybody new coming in. So there's that fear.
Yeah, well, it's a human thing.
Yes.
To be cautious and to be scared of things that they don't know and they don't understand. But yeah, you're exactly right about the Afghanistan situation is like people that
look. I mean, look. I think all it needs is a system that works, right? That's all everyone's asking for. Is you don't have to pile them up in hotels. Just put more people into the Home Office and just get the system working. Those that have a right to stay here, great. Those that aren't, no, you can't. And I think everyone accepts that. But get the system working. But instead, we create what look like fires, don't we? So we point to that fire for a while. Look at that over there. Look at them over there. And I think that's perhaps some people might say part of the strategy.
Yeah. And when you are interviewing notable, big figures, I just end up entertaining rubbish, entertainment people. But when you're interviewing,
when are you doing that? Next? When's that?
I don't know. Joe Lycett's coming up next week, and it's is that a difficult thing to do? How much sort of prep are you able to do, and is it intimidating to be sort of faced with the very people that you're talking about?
Well, when I first started, it was intimidating. It's like, my gosh, all right, you're with Susanna and Kate, and they're great journalists. I mean, they're doing it for 20-odd years, so it is intimidating. But really, we get lots of briefs from our team overnight and stuff, and if you're plugged into the news, and often it's just very simple questions, just really simple, and I've sort of do that thing of stick to one or two key points and wait for an answer, and that's the key thing. And I have to say that, we've talked a lot about the Conservatives, but the same with the Labour Party as well. I have to say, when we talk about migration, doesn't appear to be an absolute clear policy at times from them, So, and I think sometimes they do, similarly to the Conservatives, worry about election coming up and what is a popular thing to say, and what they can and can't say, particularly when it comes to things like Brexit. So, with both parties, I sort of think, well, just stick to a couple of really key issues that I think the public really want to know about.
Yeah.